committed to working with you until my very last breath, to defending the dignity of the child in the womb, to defend the dignity of the elderly, the sick, the disabled, and every human person. After the Army, I went to college. After college, I made a 40-year plan to end abortion when I was in, as absurd as it may sound, when I was in the Army. And about 6 years into this plan, I realized it just wasn't going to work. And I called Dr. Alan Keyes, who I had met when he came to speak at my college. I said, Dr. Keyes, I've been trying to do everything. I'm chairman of the Young Republicans, chief of staff for a state representative, director of Right to Life, and I can't even get partial birth abortion introduced into our legislature. What should I do? And he said, you know, the darker the world becomes, the further your light will shine. He said, just pray. And I said, thank you, Dr. Keyes. I hung up and I said, I'm never calling that guy again. I'm an atheist. He's telling me to pray. That's the solution. I'm now a Catholic, but at the time I was an atheist. And so that day I did pray, probably the purest prayer of my life. And I said, God, if you exist, you must hate abortion as much as I do. I can't end abortion on my own. If I'm to have any part in ending abortion, you need to bring me rich people, famous people, and powerful people, because this just isn't working for a high school dropout here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in Hawaii. Several years ago, I was invited by the Holy See to Rome with Eduardo and a few other Americans, and men from all over the world were brought there to talk about how we build a culture of life in the world. And as I looked around at some of the most influential men on the planet, I could hear God whisper, "Now what, smart guy?" And that's when I realized that God has already given us the grace we need to end abortion. We have just failed to correspond to that grace. As the years went on, I got involved in producing films, Bella, The Stoning of Soraya M., several documentaries. I worked on political campaigns. And in November of 2008, it was probably a Tuesday in November, it was the saddest day of my life. It was an election, and we were just one Supreme Court judge away from overturning Roe, and my high school girlfriend called me, and I was in Ohio campaigning, and she said, today's the day you keep your promise, today's the day. I didn't have her confidence, but I was happy to hear she was confident. She said, by the time I land, we'll be just one step closer to that promise being fulfilled. By the time she landed, the election had been over, and we lost, and I was broken. And I went home. I went to a little hotel in Cleveland. It was a dingy hotel, and I was miserable. I was crying. I turned on the television. I said, I need to watch a funny movie. I hit the menu button, and the only funny movie I could see was Baby's Mama. Have you seen Baby's Mama? No, see, it wasn't even funny. You never heard of it. But I laughed, and I cried, and I fell asleep. You know, when I woke up the next morning, I felt relieved, because I realized I'd been banking on one election, one man, this year, next year, this is the year. But I never really properly assessed, we have never really properly assessed the situation. All of us, especially as Christians, especially as Catholics, have a very special duty, and it's going to take all of us. In 1995, Pope John Paul II called Catholics to launch a great campaign for human dignity. He said that in his life he faced down three great ideologies of evil: Nazism, communism, and the culture of death. And of those three great ideologies, he said the culture of death is the worst. That can sound cavalier for me to say. If we go back 100 years from right now to 1910, since 1910 we had World War I, the Bolshevik Revolution, we had Hitler's rise to power, we had Stalin's purges, the Soviet Union killed 60 million people, World War II, tens of millions of people killed, Nazi Germany killed 20 million people alone, 7 million through genocide. We had the Khmer Rouge kill 1/3 of their population, genocide in Rwanda, Cambodia. We had 60 million people murdered by Mao Zedong in China. Yet Pope John Paul II said, worse than Nazism, worse than communism is the culture of death, and that Catholics are called to launch this great campaign. And the folks who are called to do it are you. Are you. And if we think that the last 100 years were brutal, do you think people in 1910 had a greater respect for human dignity than we did? Than we do? I think they did. Did they have a better understanding of the incomparable worth of the human person than we do? I think they did. And so, it's not just about abortion. In fact, abortion is not the end. For us, it's just the first milestone. When we defend the unborn child in the womb, we take a great step towards advancing the incomparable worth of the human person, but it's not the end. We're actually in a campaign to save our century from the brutality of the last century. And how are we going to do it? If you want to accomplish something, look to someone who's already done it and just do what they do. It's easy. So what did Pope John Paul II, how did he fight the Nazis? He was an actor. And the Nazis, when they came into Poland, sought to destroy Polish culture, the Catholic culture. And so he fought the Nazis by putting on plays. And so winning Hollywood is a necessary condition to winning the culture war. Now, not all of us are going to be filmmakers. Some of you may be. And if you aspire to be, trust me, you can be. If you want to be actors, actresses, writers, directors, you can be. If you want to do it, it's easy. You can do it. We need to do that. It is a necessary condition. For those of you who aren't, what kind of films are you watching? Are you giving money to the Hollywood equivalent of Planned Parenthood? Are you giving money to production companies that seek to undermine and destroy the dignity of the human person? So you have to be very careful what kinds of movies you go see. Not just how it impacts your imagination and your moral imagination, but you're actually funding industries that undermine human dignity. So it's art. Number two, our faith. What a gift. I wasn't raised Catholic. For 1,600 years, my family was baptized and confirmed in the Catholic Church until my father dropped the ball in the 8th grade and never went to Mass again. I told my dad recently, trying to get him to come back to church, I said, Dad, since 400 AD, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, for over a millennia and a half, all of our family has been baptized and confirmed, married and buried in the Catholic Church. I said, you are the weakest link. You've turned your back on 1,500 years of tradition. None of you be that person. You owe it to your ancestors. You owe it to your posterity, and you owe it to God. Don't let 1,600 years of tradition die with you. The faith that your family gave you. The gospel of life cannot be separated from the gospel of Jesus Christ. Period. It's through the church. We're not going to end abortion, but through the church. Number two, and you're going to say, how does this apply to me? Or number three, civic duty. We live in a constitutional republic. You're young, you're in school. You have to study hard. We're called to love God and love our neighbor. But when you live in a constitutional republic, when you have the privileges and opportunities in life that you have, studying is a severe duty. You have to take it as such. You are in a race to save your century from a century like the past. And the most important thing you can do right now is study and be an example to your family. And when you're old enough to vote, you must promise to never, ever vote for a candidate who supports an intrinsic moral evil. Never to vote for any candidate who supports abortion. Father Richard Newhouse, who died a Catholic priest, he was a Lutheran minister in the 60s. And in the 60s, he said the greatest tragedy in American political history is that the pro-life flag was planted in the Republican side of the debate. He's half right. Some of our families are Republicans, some are Democrats, some are independent. The greatest tragedy in American political history is that the pro-life flag is not planted firmly in both of our main political parties. And the good news is, people your age, under 30, 78% are pro-life. And it doesn't matter if they identify as liberal, conservative, Republican, or Democrat. Don't lose that. Now, we went over today, so I only have a little bit of time. My organization is called HERO, and you got the little whole life pledge, right? Right here, to always stand up for human dignity. If you go to our website, we have a $5,000 scholarship. Just click on scholarship, and you can see how you can win $5,000 for college. We do work all around the world, from Haiti to Darfur. We provide 10% of the water in Sudan, and our mission is to defend human dignity wherever it's attacked. Several months ago, I was in Sudan. I was in Darfur. We were inspecting our wells. I met some boys. The oldest boy was about your age. And there were a group of boys going down to about 4 or 5. And they were all orphans. And the oldest was sort of like the father. Imagine you responsible for 6 or 7 other children. He was responsible. All of them had lost their family in the genocide and the war. And I was walking from the village to our base camp. And as I was walking, the boys started following me. And they were playing soccer with us every day, but this day they were very formal. They were very formal. I didn't understand it. And I thought it was kind of strange. And the oldest boy was walking right next to me marching. I taught him how to march the day before. And he was marching, and he just kept looking up at me. And he finally stopped, and he said, "Mister, take us where you going?" I said, "I'm going back to the camp." "You want to go back to the camp and play soccer?" He goes, no, mister, take us where you go.